Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I caught Cynthia's voice before I even opened the door, laughing, half yelling, music thumping behind her like we lived in a nightclub. She walked in like she still owned the place, even though her name wasn't on the lease anymore. "Farmer boy finally turned the heat on, huh?" she said, kicking off her boots like this was still her kitchen. Fiona, a toddler with quick, unsteady steps, peeked around the corner with her hair sticking up in soft brown spikes. Cynthia didn't even notice. "I'm Bruce Campbell. Back then, I was 29. I lived just outside Harlan, Iowa. Flat land, soybeans, and a grain elevator that smells like metal and rain. I married Cynthia when I was 23. She was 21, beautiful, loud, untouchable in heels. She lit up bars, and I thought I could hold the daytime while she ruled the night. Dumb idea. Fiona was born before I turned 27. I'll never forget her hand gripping my finger. Tiny, warm, real. I wanted a son, sure, but the second that girl opened her eyes, I was in it for life. That was when Cynthia started checking out. First, her mood flattened. Doctor called it postpartum. I called it her disappearing. "I'm still young," she said one night, curling her lashes while I held a crying baby. Next thing I knew, she was pulling bar shifts in Council Bluffs. Then she started dancing. Said it paid better. She came home smelling like tequila and hairspray at 3 in the morning. I didn't fight at first. I worked. Seasonal crew bossing, harvest, planning crop rotations for neighbors. I was dead on my feet, but steady. I changed diapers, warmed bottles, kissed my daughter's head in the dark. I thought holding it together would bring her back. Instead, she started talking down to me. "Farmer boy can't even keep the lights on without me." Said it right in front of Fiona. I didn't even flinch. Then came Henry Voss. Owned the club. 50-something silver watch, tight shirt over a rich gut. He bought Cynthia attention, drinks, a phone. She gave him her time, and mine. When I brought it up, she laughed in my face. "You're not my dad." We were done in under 6 weeks. I didn't fight for her. I fought for Fiona. I wanted her safe. Cynthia didn't want custody. Said kids tied her down. No argument from me. I packed Fiona's things, strapped her into the back seat of my truck, and drove to Mom's house just off Interstate 80. Teresa welcomed us, arms wide. Paul, my stepdad, didn't. "You got a plan?" he said, first thing. Then stuck a list of house rules on the fridge like I was 15. I bit my tongue. We stayed quiet, helped out, kept clean. Fiona learned to climb stairs on that ugly carpeted staircase. Then one night I came down for formula and heard Paul through the cracked office door. He's dead weight. Raising a girl like that, soft. This isn't a daycare. Mom whispered back, "Don't. Please don't push him." I stood there in the dark with the bottle in my hand and made a decision. Next morning, I packed 2 blue totes and zipped Fiona into her coat. Didn't wait for breakfast. Didn't say goodbye. I turned the truck north and didn't look back until I hit the county line. Grandpa Philip opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd heard my tires hit the gravel and just waited for the knock out of courtesy. "You did right, boy," he said, and didn't even look at me first. He crouched straight down and hugged Fiona tight. She blinked like a confused duck, and then gave him a hug right back, chubby arms squeezing his neck. He smelled like shop rags and strong coffee, like someone who still believed in work the way other people believe in church. The house was old and clean. Wood creaked under your heels but held firm. I dropped our 2 totes by the door and took a breath for the first time in what felt like months. No fridge rules, no tension in the walls. Just the slow tick of an old clock and the faint sound of a radio left on low in the shop. "Rooms haven't moved," Grandpa said, tossing me a house key. "Breakfast is at 6. Everything else is by reason." I laughed. That was Grandpa. The guest room smelled faintly of oil soap and canned tomatoes. Fiona curled up on the old bed and went out like a light. I sat on the floor and stared at the ceiling fan, running through every mile it took to get here. By the end of that first week, we had a rhythm. I picked up placement work fast, matching harvest crews with open hands, checking crop calendars for a couple older guys who didn't trust the internet. Fiona chased the barn cat and tried naming every chicken. We weren't thriving, but we were steady. I worked a few weekend hours down at the co-op market, helping local producers organize booth schedules and track payouts. Grandpa had built most of the current setup himself. He ran the market board and barked orders like a judge in BIB overalls. I didn't get special treatment. "Pay Bruce," he'd yell after a loadout, stamping the clipboard with the back of his hand like a gavel. Fiona loved it. She'd sit on an overturned bucket by the tomato crates, legs swinging, drawing shapes in the dust. One morning she pulled my sleeve and whispered, "Why did the chicken cross the barn?" Then giggled for 10 full seconds before whispering, "To scare the cat," like it was the funniest thing in the world. I laughed because she did. Evenings were slower. Grandpa would sit with his old mug, stained and chipped, seed company logo faded to a ghost, and talk plain. Do right, and right will come. Not fast, but it comes. He said that one night, rubbing his thumb along the edge of a thick gold ring on his hand. It was heavy, deep carved, a dark blood-colored stone in the center with our family crest pressed into it. "That ring's been passed down since the railroad days," he said, "but it don't go to the one with the best luck. It goes to the one who holds the line." I asked him once why he still wore it if it was meant to be passed on. "Because I'm not done holding yet," he said, and that was the end of that. He wouldn't let me fix much on the farm. I offered to tear down the old fencing or replace a carb in the mower, but he shut that down every time. "You advise and you organize," he'd say, waving me off like I was interrupting a sermon. "You're the guy who sets the work, not the guy crawling under it. That's your trade now." I didn't always like it, but I respected it. Besides, I was already managing 6 properties' crew rotations, a couple storm cleanups, and a grain bin repair after a wind shear popped the door off. I didn't need another wrench in my hand. I needed a clipboard and 2 more hours a day. Paul started poking his nose back in through texts to Mom. Sent her long rants about me being enabled, how I was dodging real life, and teaching my kid to expect handouts. I told her to ignore him. She still called, usually from the back porch so Paul wouldn't hear. "I just want you to keep peace, son," she'd whisper. "Don't give him ammo." "We're fine, Mom," I said. "Really, let it go." She didn't believe me, but she wanted to. Tax time hit rough. Fiona's hospital bills from when she was born had been sold to collections, and I was still clawing at them when Grandpa slid a folded check across the table one night. "I'm covering property tax this year," he said. "But you're signing this." He handed me a memo. It was typed on a yellow legal pad and said, "No gifts." "This is earned." I signed it. That was the deal, clear and honest. No debt, just trust. I started stacking small wins, got the county school district to pilot a field-to-cafeteria plan using produce from our co-op vendors, pitched it right, got the superintendent's nod. Grandpa saw the paper in the kitchen and actually slapped the table. "Well, I'll be. You gave me 10 years back," he said, eyes sharp under those wiry brows. Later that week, he pulled a cigar box from the old cabinet in the shop. Inside were letters, folded notes, clippings from newspapers with yellowed tape still holding the corners. He held up one folded page, creased twice and marked, "To my grandchildren." I reached for it, but he pulled it back and smiled. "Not yet," he said, and slid it into a cedar box I didn't even know was part of the bench. He flipped up a false panel, tucked it in, and closed it slow, like sealing a vault. Spring came in like an insult, cold, raw, and late. Grandpa's cough started as a tick, then cracked into something that sounded like his lungs were made of sandpaper. I got him to the clinic twice before he agreed to the hospital. The doctor said, "Pneumonia plus age." Grandpa said, "I'm old, not dumb, but I'm still going home." They sent him back with oxygen, pills I couldn't pronounce, and a schedule that lit up my phone with med alarms every 4 hours. He refused the hospital bed we offered, said he'd rather die upright than sink into one. I set up a recliner near the scanner radio, kept the coffee warm, and moved Fiona's drawings into view. She drew him a new rooster every day, each one crazier than the last. Pink feathers, lopsided beaks, fire-breathing tails. He taped everyone to the wall near the calendar with his own trembling hands. "I don't need a nurse," he grunted one night while I changed his oxygen tube. "You've got me instead," I said. He smirked. "Then I'm in worse shape than I thought." That night, just before the meds were due, he waved me over with 2 fingers. I thought he needed help sitting up. Instead, he reached into the small pocket sewn into his flannel and pulled out the signet ring. It dropped into my palm heavier than I expected. "This stays with the Campbell who keeps the family," he said. "It's you." I didn't say anything. I just looked at it. Dark stone, gold worn soft around the edges, the crest pressed deep like it had purpose. He narrowed his eyes. "Don't box it. Don't lock it up. You wear it. A ring's a ring. The meaning is the thing." "I will," I said, still staring at the weight in my hand. "Say it like you mean it, boy." "I will, I swear." He leaned back and closed his eyes. "Then I can sleep now." 3 days later, he died in that same chair. Quiet, calm, like someone turning off an engine that had run just long enough. I heard the last breath from the hallway and didn't move for a full minute. My knees buckled, and I caught myself on the doorframe, trying not to fall apart. I felt 12 again. The funeral was short. The town showed up. Men he'd advised or argued with stood shoulder to shoulder in work boots and second-best jackets. I didn't cry in front of them. I waited until the house emptied, then sat on the back steps while Fiona played in the gravel like it was just another sunny afternoon. The will named me, house, workshop, the acreage we still held since the 1970s. To Mom, he left a savings bond and a letter. I drove it down to her myself. She read it once, folded it tight, and cried into my coat like I was still her baby. Back at the house, I slipped the ring on my finger and couldn't stop turning it. It felt strange at first, like it didn't belong yet. I figured that was part of the deal. It was never about comfort. A week later, I drove down to Council Bluffs to see a jeweler Grandpa had trusted. Marco ran a quiet shop off Main Street, smelled like silver polish and pipe tobacco. He took one look at the ring, popped a loop into his eye, and gave a low whistle. "You've got something serious here," he said. "Late 19th century, most likely. The gold's custom cast. That's a bloodstone. Deep cut. Excellent preservation. You're looking at 22 to 28 grand easy. To the right collector? Could fetch more." I asked what it meant for insurance. He started talking about auctions, estate tags, provenance paperwork. I heard numbers, but none of it meant anything. My fingers were already curling back around the ring. I slid it back on and stood up. "Thanks, but it's not leaving my hand," I said. Marco gave me a nod. "Money doesn't touch what this is." I drove home with the window down, the wind loud, the ring catching light in flashes. I didn't care what it was worth. It was mine now. Earned, not gifted. Things didn't slow down. If anything, they ramped up. I picked up every seasonal contract Grandpa used to shepherd: windbreak repair on county land, roadside mowing rotations, early prep for cover crops before the fall frost. Everyone already knew the name. They just started calling me instead. I kept the scanner on. I answered calls with, "What do you need?" and not much else. People paid on time because Grandpa taught them to. One night, Fiona stood by the garden plot with her hands full of clover and asked, "Where did Grandpa go?" I looked up at the sky, too clear, too bright, and then back down at her. "He's in everything that grows here," I said. She nodded once like that was enough. Kids don't need lectures. They need something they can carry. After she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and twisted the ring. The edge of the crest rubbed against my finger like a grip I couldn't shake. I don't care if it sounds dumb. That ring did more for me than any advice or prayer I ever got. Next morning, I called the county office to file for a small business extension on the farm records. I marked myself as both landholder and service provider. I wasn't just holding the line anymore. I was running it. 4 summers out from Grandpa's passing, July rolled in, angry and wet. I had just turned 33. Fiona was a few weeks from 6 and growing fast, sharp, curious, full of quiet joy. That afternoon, a thunder line ripped across the river and slammed into our side of the state like a car crash in the sky. Wind slapped the siding, turned the gravel roads into soup. I parked the truck under the awning and hoped the trees held. By 8:30, the lights flickered hard. I got Fiona bathed and into bed with a flashlight and her stuffed chicken. She tucked it under her chin like always and said, "Tell the storm to go somewhere else." I kissed her forehead and said, "It's already on the way out." I wasn't sure I believed it. Around 11, I was halfway through checking the shop door when a small fist hit the front door. 3 times, fast, then a pause, then again. "Sir, my mom, please." It was a boy's voice. Little, panicked, high-pitched and hoarse from yelling. I flung the door open and found him standing there, drenched from head to toe, eyes wide like a deer pinned in headlights. His hair stuck to his forehead, and his arms were trembling. Behind him, I saw the flashers from an SUV sagged nose down in the ditch by my mailbox. "My name's Brian. She can't walk. She needs help." I didn't even grab a jacket. I grabbed a towel, threw it around his shoulders, and ran for the ditch with him right behind me. Rain had slowed to a mist, but the mud was slick, and I almost slipped twice before reaching the driver's side. She was still inside, seatbelt off, ankle twisted up near the pedals, face red-striped from the airbag, eyes open, sharp, alert. "You the farmer?" she asked, breath tight. "You look like a guy who hauls things." "I am," I said. "Let's get you out of here." She winced but kept her humor. "Don't worry. I don't ride well in mud." I braced her shoulders and lifted. She wasn't heavy, but she was solid, lean, like someone who worked outside and didn't baby herself. Her arms gripped around my neck as I got her out of the cab and across the slop toward the porch. Brian ran ahead, slapping the door open. Inside, I set her on the couch, propped her leg on a stool, and wrapped an ice pack in a kitchen towel. She hissed through her teeth and muttered, "That's real nice, thanks." No sarcasm intended. Brian looked around like he wasn't sure what to do, so I pointed to the kitchen. "Top cabinet. 2 mugs. Pick hot chocolate or apple cider." He took it like a mission. Fiona must have heard the noise, because she came padding down the hallway in my hoodie, rubbing her eyes. She saw the woman on the couch, looked at the ankle, and without a word, walked over and handed her a stuffed cow. Her favorite one, the one she slept with. "This one helps when things hurt," Fiona said. The woman blinked, then smiled at her like she'd just been given a bandage made of gold. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the best thing I've gotten all day." We got through the formalities once things settled. Her name was Brenda Nelson, 35, 2 years older than me. Lived 1 town over. Ran a small co-op storefront off Main, landscaping side gigs when the season allowed. "Car's old," she said, nodding toward the window. "Tires were newer. I guess the road didn't care." "What about the boy's dad?" I asked, not trying to pry but needing to know. She sighed like someone uncorking an old memory. "Grant Whitaker. Ran off about a year ago. Realtor lady promised him easy living and a condo with a hot tub. He didn't last 6 months. Now he wants back in. Texts me weekly." She pulled out her phone and showed me 2 screenshots. Grant's tone was all too familiar. "This time's different. I just need a loan to get the dealership job back. I'm ready to be a real dad again. You owe me the chance." I nodded. I didn't say much. I'd heard that same pitch from too many mouths, in too many bars, at too many gas stations while guys lit cigarettes with one hand and excuses with the other. We talked until the storm softened into mist. I found her a spare blanket and set Brian up on the armchair with the cow Fiona had handed over earlier. "You've got a good place here," she said, voice quiet now. "Feels like it's lived in without being heavy." You'd be surprised what this place has seen, I replied. Next morning, the road was still a mess, but I got her SUV winched out with the John Deere and replaced the back left tire. Took about an hour. She watched from the porch, one leg propped up, mug in her lap. How much do I owe you? She asked. Don't worry about it. Nope, she cut in. You saved my kid. You fixed my car. You get paid. She handed me a folded bill. I didn't argue. I respected it. She wasn't the kind to owe favors with strings attached. That stuck with me more than the storm. A couple weeks later, the school district sent word they were opening bids for a green space rebuild. Native grasses, raised beds, a teaching garden. Students hands-on, start to finish. My co-op lead flagged it and said, "This is your wheelhouse, Bruce, but I'd pair with someone for site design." He handed me a short list. Brenda Nelson was right at the top. I stopped by her store, Nelson Grow Goods, tucked between a feed supplier and a bait shop. Clean setup, labels straight, price tags real, not fancy. She saw me walk in, gave a half smile and said, "Figured you'd circle back." "School project," I said. "You in?" She stepped around the counter, wiped her hands on her jeans, and offered her hand. "Let's build something that lasts," she said. We shook on it. Her grip was firm, dry, and confident. I remember thinking right then, it felt like lining up two beams that were finally cut to the same size. Brenda's truck had barely cleared the gravel when I heard another engine coming from the opposite direction, revving higher, rougher, familiar in the worst way. I stepped onto the porch and saw her. Cynthia. Same walk, same smug posture, but a little sloppier at the edges now. She had on a denim jacket that looked expensive, lips glossy, pupils wide. That club sheen I used to fall for. It looked fake in daylight. She didn't knock. Just pushed the door open like it was hers again and wandered straight into the kitchen. "You ruined my life, Bruce," she said, dragging a long fingernail across the bowl of cut fruit Fiona had made that morning. I stood between her and the hallway. "Don't touch anything." She picked up a slice of pear anyway, chewed it like she was at a tasting event. "New ring?" she asked, eyeing my hand. "Looks pricey." "What's that? Onyx or bloodstone?" "Don't talk about my house, my kid, or my hand," I said. She smirked, leaned against the counter. "You still mad about the past, or just outgrown your hay bale roots?" I didn't answer. I just held the door open and waited. She took the hint, but not without one last spin through the living room like she was checking for dust she could criticize. 2 nights later, I got 5 voice messages from a number I didn't recognize. Different area code, no name, no warning. I played them back in the barn with the volume down. It was her, slurred, half whining, half threatening. "Henry's done with me. He's got tabs due too. It's not just me, Bruce. You owe me. I gave you my 20s. You think raising a kid makes you better than me? I could work it off. There are ways. I'm not dumb. You know what I mean. I want that ring. You're not even a real Campbell. I swear I'll take back what I earned." I saved every file, labeled each with the timestamp and forwarded them to my cloud folder. Then I called Sheriff Dalton. He showed up 2 hours later in his cruiser, stepped into the mudroom like he'd been there 100 times, and sat down at the kitchen table. "She threatening physical harm?" he asked. "Not directly," I said, "but she mentioned my kid and the ring." He nodded slowly. "If she shows again, don't escalate. Just keep your cool. We'll write paper next time." The next time came faster than I wanted. 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. 10 calls, 4 texts, all her. I silenced it, didn't engage. At 3:40, I heard tires on the gravel. Headlights flared across the window, engine revving up the lane. I got up, flipped the porch light on, and waited just inside the front door. Fiona was asleep, but I stood between her room and whatever was about to come through the dark. Cynthia stumbled out of her car in cut-off shorts and platform boots, mascara smeared under her eyes like war paint. She stomped onto the porch and slapped her palm against the window. "Open up, farmhand!" she yelled. "I want to see my kid!" "You're not coming in," I said through the glass. She stepped to the side, tried peeking through to see past me. "You got Fiona in there? You letting her stay up late now? Real parenting." "Leave." She tried the door handle. I'd already deadbolted it. "You think this house makes you somebody? Still Mr. Protector, huh?" She laughed, too loud, too wild. Then she leaned forward, put her forehead against the glass and whispered, "That ring's not yours. It never was." Fiona stirred down the hall. I heard her roll over. Cynthia leaned sideways to try and look through the bedroom window. I stepped between them and snapped, "Back off." She flinched, then smiled. "You miss me?" "No. And if you step any closer to my daughter's window, we're done talking." She backed off, laughing again like it was a show for someone. She peeled out in reverse, spraying gravel across my truck bumper, and disappeared into the dark. By 8 the next morning, I was in the county clerk's office filing for a protective order. Judge on rotation gave me a temporary within 48 hours. I walked out with a paper in hand and a copy in the truck. It felt like latching a gate I should have latched years ago. Word traveled fast in a small town. Brenda found out before I told her. She came by the co-op that afternoon and stood with me by the cold case where the eggs were stacked. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," I said. She didn't blink. "Need help with the school timeline? I'll handle the public side if you want." "No, I got it," I said. But the offer landed. That night I got a text from Mom. 3 sentences and a screenshot. Paul had written her a long paragraph about how women change when men get soft, and how he warned her this would happen if she kept mothering me. She read it to me over the phone, voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Bruce." "Change the subject," I said. "Please." I didn't sleep much. I kept the ring on the nightstand and dragged the fire extinguisher in from the mudroom and set it by the door. Not because I thought she'd come back with fire, but because I'd rather be ready than heroic. I taped the order to the inside of the pantry door, just high enough for me to see every morning when I reached for cereal. That was the point. Not fear, just fact. Boundaries need nails. The next week, the school green space project kicked off. Brenda and I walked the grounds with the superintendent, Mr. Gaines, clean haircut, sleeves rolled, real excited about native species like he'd discovered them himself. We flagged water lines, mapped out where the raised beds would go, and talked trench depth like it was sacred. Brenda moved with purpose, clipboard in hand, black pen, no nonsense. Watching her handle logistics was like watching someone wire a breaker box, clean, controlled, nothing wasted. Then, while we were marking where the pollinator patch would go, I heard bass before I saw the car. Cynthia's white Chrysler rolled by slow, music thumping too loud for a school zone. She leaned out the window and waved. Not a normal wave. One of those slow, wide, drunk on attention waves. Brenda saw it, didn't say anything, just paused, capped her pen, and turned back to the utility map. I felt my stomach drop. That night, after Fiona was asleep and the dishes were drying in the rack, my phone buzzed. A text from Cynthia, a selfie from Henry's loft, same velvet couch she used to brag about, champagne in her hand, Henry blurred in the background looking like a confused wax figure. Text read, "He says hi. Miss me yet?" I didn't answer, just locked the screen and set the phone face down. But I must have reacted without meaning to, because Brenda, sitting at the other end of the couch going over invoices, noticed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She looked at me, really looked, then zipped up her bag, slow and neat. "See you Monday," she said, and left. I let her go. That was my mistake. Next morning, I was outside before the sun burned off the fog, loading seed samples into the truck. I drove to the co-op early, parked in back, walked into Brenda's office without knocking. She looked up once, then went back to whatever she was typing. "I'm not chasing that," I said. "Cynthia, That's over. She's noise. Brenda clicked her mouse. Didn't even blink. Are you sure you're done proving yourself to her? I didn't answer right away. The room was too quiet, like it had been waiting for that question since day one. Yes, I'm sure, I said. Brenda stared a second longer, then turned back to her screen. Okay, let's get the mulch delivery moved up. Rain Thursday. That was it. Clean fix. But I felt it settle in my chest for the rest of the day like a latch finally catching. That Saturday, Fiona and Brian were supposed to clean the mudroom, but instead, they went digging through Grandpa's shop like it was a treasure cave. About 20 minutes later, they both came screaming back toward the house like they'd found buried gold. Brian held the cigar box. Fiona held the cedar lid like it was a sacred artifact. It was under the workbench, Brian yelled. There's a secret door. They laid everything out on the kitchen table. The letter on top, folded twice, yellowed with time, marked in Grandpa's handwriting, to my grandchildren. I sat down, unlatched it, and read it out loud. It wasn't long. Grandpa never was. He wrote about keeping steady when people go loud, about choosing family every single day, not once, not just when it's easy, but again and again, especially when it's not. He wrote that being a Campbell wasn't blood or land. It was how you showed up when others didn't. Brian was quiet the whole time. When I finished, he looked up at me. Does that mean I can belong here too? I leaned in and said, You already do. He smiled like he'd been handed a badge. That night, after they were both asleep, I took the ring off and drove into Council Bluffs. Marco still had his light on in the back of the shop. He buzzed me in. Still fits? He asked, nodding at the ring. Yeah, but I wanted to ask about adding a second band someday. Something that'd sit with it. Match, kind of. He smiled without looking up from his loop. Then stop banging it on tailgates. He cleaned it up, polished the gold, reset the stone just a hair. I paid in cash and left grinning like a fool. On the way home, Sheriff Dalton called. I'm just giving you a heads up, he said. Got a welfare check 2 nights ago. Same address. Cynthia. Neighbor called it in. Sounded messy. Anything serious? I asked. She was a mess, Bruce, but nothing criminal. Just not your problem unless she makes it your problem. Got it. I hung up, got home, and pulled the pantry door open. That protective order was still there, still flat against the inside panel. I printed a second copy and taped it behind the coat hook in the mudroom. I wasn't scared. I just didn't want to have to explain it again. If she came back, there'd be no doubt. No gray areas. Next morning, Fiona asked if we could paint the raised beds bright blue. Why blue? I asked. She shrugged. Blue looks like the sky. So stuff will grow up and think it's flying. I said, let's get paint after lunch. She cheered and ran off to tell Brian. I watched her go, ring warm on my finger again, and thought, this is what it looks like when the noise dies down. We painted the raised beds blue. Fiona got it in her hair. Brian slapped his handprints on one of the corners. Brenda said nothing until I lifted the wrong end of a soil tote and almost threw my back. Then she just raised her eyebrows and said, You organizing or showing off? The school install moved fast after that. Crew lanes chalked, beds leveled. We let the kids help plant beans like they were burying treasure. Some of them handled the seeds like jewels. One kid yelled, This is better than video games, and Brenda wrote it down on her clipboard like it belonged in the plan. The superintendent liked what he saw. After the first full walkthrough, he pulled us aside and said, Let's add a fall prairie patch. I'll push it through the board. That meant steady work through November, and a clean line item that didn't look like a gamble. Real income. Real trust. That's when Cynthia decided to crawl back into relevance. She didn't show up in person. She sent a typed letter, claimed I stole her youth, and withheld Fiona in violation of her maternal rights. Her words. I handed it to Cole, my lawyer, steady guy, no frills. He read it once, folded it in half and said, "We'll reply with the protective order and an offer for scheduled supervised visits. Proof of treatment required." That was it. No drama, just paperwork with a spine. Then Henry tried his hand. Blocked number, voice too smooth, like old scotch. "Bruce, let's discuss the ring. I can help. Cash considerations, no strings." "You're wasting your breath," I said. He chuckled. "You always had too much pride. We could have worked something out." "We're not doing business," I said, and ended the call. He didn't call back, but I made a mental note to lock the shop doors every night just in case. Paul, meanwhile, tried a different angle. Sent me a Facebook message full of passive bravado. "Real men don't hide behind paperwork." That's how it started. Went downhill from there. I didn't answer. Didn't block him either. I wanted him to see my silence. Mom texted later. Half apology, half guilt dump. All commas and hearts. "He means well, Bruce. He just doesn't know how to let things go. I'm sorry. Love you." I read it once, then turned off my phone and walked out to the barn. That week, Brenda and I finalized plans for the fall workshop. Soil basics for home gardeners. We expected maybe a dozen people. We printed 20 flyers just in case. 43 showed up. We ran out of chairs. People leaned against bags of mulch and took notes on scrap cardboard. Brenda had laminated guides and passed out seed starter kits like party favors. I handled the Q&A like a county fair auctioneer. Fast, no fluff, real answers. It was the first time in a long time I felt proud without having to explain it afterward. Brian started calling me coach whenever we were working outside, spreading compost, marking rows, fixing fencing. When we were inside or at the store, it was Bruce, said with a half grin like he was testing how far I'd let him feel grown. The kid was quick, paid attention, helped without being asked. He was the helper I used to imagine back when I thought I'd raise a son someday. Fiona drew us one evening. Stick figures, me with a shovel, Brenda holding a clipboard, Brian with a bucket, the barn behind us, family written in big block letters across the top. I taped it beside Grandpa's calendar. Didn't even think about it. Just did it. A few days later, Dalton dropped by with a sealed envelope and a look I didn't like. "Just FYI," he said, handing it over. Cynthia got into it with someone at the club. Noise complaint turned into a call. No arrest, but it's logged. I opened it at the table after he left. The words were sterile. Intoxicated, verbal dispute. Management requested removal. No surprises. But it's something, seeing your past in a printed report, like evidence of a fire you used to live inside. That evening, Brenda and I sat on the porch, watching Fiona and Brian try to convince a chicken to ride in a wagon. She sipped her tea and said, "You ever think about leaving the farm?" I shook my head. "No, but I think about making it bigger." She glanced sideways. "Bigger how?" "Organizing crews, advising full-time, getting small farms linked to steady buyers. Some of these guys just need someone to connect the dots." "Then do it," she said. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened a new Word doc. Typed at the top, Campbell Field Services. Under that, planting windows, labor scheduling, storm response, crew planning, seasonal guidance, no branding, no fluff, just the truth. I printed a one-pager and pinned it beside the pantry, next to the protective order. 1 page to protect, 1 page to build. That's how I split the noise from the work. Then I sent 3 emails, one to the co-op board, one to the school's operations manager, and one to an old farmer named Dean, who once told me he'd hire help if he trusted anyone enough to make a schedule. All 3 answered by morning. Wind pushed in from the west that Tuesday night. Hot, wrong, jittery, like the air knew what was coming before I did. Fiona had fallen asleep on the living room rug, markers on her hands, a stuffed chicken tucked under her chin. I scooped her up, carried her to bed, checked every lock, then double-checked the one on the mudroom. It was quiet for maybe an hour. Then, at 11:40 sharp, I heard fast tires hit the gravel like someone gunning for a dead end. Then came the thud. Heavy, uneven footsteps stumbled across the porch boards. Then a voice, half sung, half mean, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Open the door, Bruce. I want my ring back." Cynthia. Of course it was Cynthia. I flipped the porch light on but kept the chain bolted. Through the glass I saw her, hair wild, eyes glassy, wearing some glittered tank top like she'd stepped out of a club and into the wrong decade. In one hand, a red plastic gas can. In the other, a cigarette lighter. "You hear me?" she shouted. "You owe me that ring, and if you don't hand it over, I'll burn this whole fake farm down and take my kid with me." I didn't move, just picked up the cordless phone and hit 911. I put it on speaker and set it on the table behind me. "Ma'am, what's your emergency?" came the dispatcher's voice. "My ex-wife is on my porch with gasoline and a lighter. My daughter is asleep inside." Cynthia banged her fist against the glass hard enough to make the whole frame rattle. "Come on, hero. Come protect your kingdom." "Stay calm, sir," the dispatcher said. "Units are en route. Do not engage. Stay secured indoors." But Cynthia didn't give me the option. She sloshed the gas can forward, soaking the steps, laughing like it was a game. "Let's see how much your little prairie paradise means when it's ash, Bruce." She tried the knob, yanked hard against the chain, then hissed through the door like something feral. "You really think that court paper means anything? You think I'm scared of paper?" That's when another engine pulled into the drive. Smooth this time, measured. Headlights lit up the porch. I looked past Cynthia and saw Brenda's truck easing in behind the Chrysler. Brian's head poked up from the back seat. Brenda rolled her window down and called out, steady as a steel beam. "Bruce, we're on with 911 too. Deputies are close." Cynthia flinched at the voice, turned to face the lights, one hand still clutching the lighter. That was my chance. I cracked the door, unhooked the chain fast, and stepped out slow with the fire extinguisher raised in both hands like a shield. She spun back toward me, eyes wide and frantic. "You think you're brave? You're nothing without that ring." She lunged for the can again. I grabbed her wrist and twisted the nozzle away. Gasoline splashed across my boots, sharp and cold. She shrieked and swung with her free hand, catching me in the ear. My head rang, and I heard Brian yell from the truck, "Coach!" I used the swing's momentum, tripped her with my ankle, and shoved the can behind me. Cynthia hit the boards hard, kicked once, then scrambled up and bolted toward the barn. Brenda's truck lights hit full beam, painting the yard in bright white. I could hear sirens now, fast and close. Cynthia made it halfway to the fence line before two cruisers roared down the lane. Deputies poured out, and Sheriff Dalton moved like he'd done this 100 times. No yelling, no panic. Just stepped behind her, grabbed her shoulders, and eased her to the dirt like he was setting down a sack of feed. She kept screaming. About Henry, about the money she was owed, about the ring I stole, about how she used to be someone. They read her rights as she thrashed once, then went limp. Brenda came up the porch after, checked my boots for burns and asked, "Did she hit you?" Her voice never shook. "Just my ear," I said. "Nothing serious." Brian stayed in the truck, hands pressed to the window. I gave him a thumbs up. He gave one back. Dalton walked over after they loaded Cynthia in. "She's going to county lockup for the night. Judge already flagged her name for involuntary eval if anything like this happened. She'll be in the hospital wing by morning." He handed me a folded paper, court memo, judge's signature, real and final. "You did the right thing," he said. "I just didn't want my daughter waking up to fire." He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and walked off. I didn't sleep, just stood on the porch while the sun started thinking about coming up. My hands shook the whole time, but I kept the hose going. I sprayed the steps, the boards, the rail, until the gas smell was gone. Inside, I washed my hands 4 times, scrubbed my boots, then flipped pancakes, because that was all I could do. Fiona woke up halfway through the first batch. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the wet porch through the screen door. Why's it all shiny like the fair? I spilled something, I said. I cleaned it up. She nodded like that was fine. Did we run out of syrup? Nope, got plenty. She sat at the table, drew a sun on a napkin, and started humming. The court took 6 weeks, but I stayed on top of every call, every form, every slow-moving deadline. When it finally wrapped, the judge signed off on a 2-year protective order with mandatory reviews tied to Cynthia's treatment compliance. No loopholes, no backdoors, just clean legal walls. Cole slid the papers across the desk, and I ran my thumb along the edges like checking the grain of good lumber. This one's airtight, he said. She shows up, she's in violation. You stay calm, we stay ahead. That was the plan. Stay calm. Stay ahead. Of course Henry couldn't leave it alone. Had his lawyer send a letter about reputational concerns and damage to future business. Cole didn't even blink. He sent back the voicemail files, the incident report from the gas can, and a bullet point list of what Henry could go do with himself. No one replied after that. The story made the rounds in town. At the co-op, a few folks raised eyebrows. 2 women in the seat aisle whispered like I couldn't hear them, but most people just nodded, shook my hand, and said the same thing. Glad you kept the kids safe. That was enough for me. I started living by a quiet clause I didn't write down, but followed all the same. No late-night texts, no softened boundaries, no visits near the club district. Not my world, not anymore. October rolled in slow and bright. The school prairie turned gold right on cue. Kids ran their hands through the tall grass like petting a dog, laughing as birds flushed out and scattered. Brenda stood next to me, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the rows like she'd built it with her own 2 hands. Feels like it belongs here, she said. It does, I answered. Brian started coming over 2 nights a week without ceremony. Sometimes Brenda stayed, sometimes not. But either way, it felt natural. Lego cities on the rug, carrots pulled too early from the raised beds, Fiona teaching Brian how to twist pipe cleaners into animal shapes that didn't resemble animals. One Thursday evening, I was loading compost into the wheelbarrow when Brian asked, "If I had your last name, could I still call you Coach?" I set the shovel down. "You could call me anything you want. You'd still be mine." He nodded once and ran off to tell Fiona, like he'd decided something permanent all by himself. Brenda and I talked it through slow. No rush. She said she didn't need a courtroom to know who Brian trusted, but if I was ready to draw the line in ink, she'd be right there. I drew up the papers and filed them with Cole. Formal, quiet, honest. When Brian asked if that made me his forever coach, I told him, I've already been that. We didn't need a ceremony, but we got a new habit. He'd tap the ring on my hand once every now and then, not asking for anything, just making sure it was still there. One Sunday, I took Mom to walk the prairie. Paul drove us in his truck and sat inside with the engine running while she and I walked the edges. She looked down the slope where the asters were still holding color and said, "I should have stood up to him sooner. You were a kid with a kid. I should have helped." I didn't say she was wrong, but I didn't want her apology ruined by a defense of him either. "This is enough," I said. "You came." We started framing a small addition off the kitchen before first frost. Just a tight insulated mudroom, a corner for the kids, and a small office for me with a window over the south field. It didn't change the house's bones, but it made room for the life we had now. I filed my business license under the name Campbell Field Services. Kept it simple. Crew coordination, seasonal planning, labor scheduling, storm recovery. No promises I couldn't keep. Just real work for real people. The co-op manager gave me 3 referrals the first week. One guy had a flooded barn, another needed a planting crew lined up before winter, and the third had been waiting 5 years for someone to help manage his harvest window without getting gouged. I showed up with a clipboard and a plan. Word got out faster than I expected. Brenda and I talked about marriage the way we talked about school projects. Heads together, over a calendar, figuring out what would work without breaking what already did. No pressure, just real time spent. One night after dinner, I walked out to the shop and opened Grandpa's drawer, turned the ring once on my finger, and stood there till I knew. Not hoped. Knew. At the county fair that weekend, under the grain bins while Fiona and Brian chased kettle corn, I pulled out a plain band and asked her. She didn't cry. She just said yes, like she'd been holding it ready, tucked somewhere under all her common sense. The kids shouted and clapped like the last whistle after a long shift. We kept it small. No flair, no flash. Just the church hall in town, white folding chairs, crock pots lined up like soldiers, pulled pork, potato salad, and my Aunt Sharon's brownies that stick to your teeth and make you swear they chipped one. Fiona wore boots under her dress. Brian had his shirt half tucked by the time we hit the vows. Felt right for us. I wore Grandpa's old suit jacket, still clean, still sharp, still tight in the shoulders, signet ring snug on my hand like it always belonged there. Sheriff Dalton showed up off duty, shook my hand with both of his and said, "No fires this time, right?" I told him we left the extinguisher in the truck, just in case. Mr. Gaines, the superintendent, brought a mason jar full of prairie seed and said, "For luck and for reseeding the back lot." Brenda laughed, said, "Already got plans for it." I think that's when it hit me. We weren't starting something, we were continuing it. I gave Brenda the custom band I'd had made, a match to my ring, same deep gold tone, small oval dark stone, engraved inside, Fiona and Brian, with our wedding date. She didn't cry, she just held my face in both hands and said, "Good choice, Coach." Fiona and Brian pretended to gag, then raced back to the cookie table. After the vows, we walked into the back room where the same judge who handled Brian's adoption paperwork waited with a single sheet and a thick black stamp. One swipe, one signature. Brian Campbell. He looked up at me like the ink made it real, then stood a little taller and said, "Now we all match." Fiona crossed her arms. "Do I get a new name too?" Brenda said, "Sweetheart, you had it the whole time." She rolled her eyes the way Cynthia used to, but without any sting behind it. Mom pulled Brenda in for a long hug after the cake, then handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was Grandpa's old pocket knife, cleaned, oiled, and sharpened. "From the house that built us," she said. Brenda held it like she'd been given a medal. Paul stood in the corner watching. He shook my hand too hard and said nothing. I didn't need more. We brought home a rescue mutt 2 days later. Brown, patchy, tail like a windshield wiper. The kids named her Dottie because she had one perfect black spot on her nose. She licks everyone's face unless you guard your chin like a soldier. That night, after the mess was swept and the chairs were folded and the dog had finally curled up on the rug, I set my signet ring on the dresser for once, just to feel it off. Then I picked up Brenda's ring and ran my thumb over the engraving inside. It felt like setting posts in concrete. I'm 33 now, but I'm telling this like a man older than that, because I've earned every mile, every night on the porch with a shaking hand, every form filed in triplicate, every drop of sweat I spent holding this place upright when no one else believed I could. People think revenge is fire, shouting, kicking doors. Mine looked different. Steady work, kids tucked in, a lock on the door. I organize crews. I advise whoever needs it. And when noise shows up, I answer with results. I kept the ring. I kept the land. I kept the name that means something now. And when I look at what stayed, not what I lost, not what I escaped, but what stayed, I know I didn't win by accident. I won by choosing every day to be the wall. Before you go, let me ask you this. What hard boundary did you finally set that changed everything for your family? If you have hype, please tap it to boost this video so more people see it. And don't forget to subscribe and like because it truly helps. Drop a comment too, even a quick good story or your own experience. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.